Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this important discussion about the future of international student recruitment, hosted in partnership with Times Higher Education and Aecc Global. I'm Jamie Ramacati, Head of Content for Student Events at THE, and I'm delighted to be your host for today's event. I think many of us in the higher education industry have found ourselves asking, what now? As we look at the impact that the global health and economic crisis has had on universities and on the plans of prospective international students. And so we are thrilled to have an exceptional group of experts with us today who can help us answer that very question and so much more. They will be sharing with us their experience and commentary on the state of international student recruitment at US and Canadian universities. We'll talk about what we learned in 2020 and what we can expect in the year ahead. While there remains quite a bit of uncertainty, there's also, I think, reason for great optimism. A new presidential administration in the United States can have ripple effects across the international education landscape, and promising early results from vaccine rollouts across the globe point to a return to something at least a bit closer to normal on the horizon. We're going to get into all of those topics and so much more with our panel in just a few minutes. Today's event was made possible by Aecc Global, so a big thank you to Aecc for supporting this event. And by way of introduction, we just want to share a brief video from Aecc.
Aecc Global is proud to work with Times Higher Education to help students around the world realize their dreams to study abroad. Our global team of over 500 dedicated professionals in 34 offices throughout 12 countries are ready to support students almost anywhere in the world.
Aecc is opening up a truly global network, and that's really impressive to me, and it's something that I really want to engage with and support.
Aecc Global not only represented in so many different countries and provides us with a fantastic network, but is always very professional and innovative and a delight to deal with.
And they are incredible to work with and easy and knowledgeable and innovative, you can think of it.
We are proud to have a growing global footprint. We are continuing to open new offices around the world. Our exceptional and amazing team is continuing to grow. We employ more than 500 dedicated professionals around the world. We've come a long way, but we're just getting started.
Aecc Global is rapidly growing market share in the UK, Canada, USA, and Australia. Technology is transforming the way students engage with education. And at Aecc Global, we are leading the way with new innovations, shaping the future of student recruitment. We are creating world-class self-service platforms for students, making applying to university convenient and faster. Our brand new student portal launching in 2021 will allow students to directly apply to courses via computer or mobile devices. From start to finish, students will be able to choose courses and apply via our platform with our intelligent document requirement generator and compliance team, ensuring applications of quality at the press of a button. Students will be able to manage applications, insurance, and browse a wide range of relevant education content. Our tailor-made, user-friendly course search platform is redefining the way students can search and filter universities and courses online. With rich images and powerful search options, including career outcome searches, accreditation search, and post-study work visa searches, Aecc Global is leading the way. At Aecc Global, we are dedicated to improving the student experience, from making it easier to study abroad to making it more accessible than ever before. As we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, Aecc Global is positioned as one of the top student recruitment organizations in the world, and we look forward to continuing to build new relationships with world-class education providers. When it comes to studying overseas, more students are choosing Aecc Global.
On behalf of Aecc Global, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Darryl Fong and I'm the COO of Aecc Global. We're excited to be hosting this event with the Times Higher Education to facilitate this important discussion in the national education industry. We know the past 12 months was unlike anything we have seen before as a result of the pandemic. It's been hard on many institutions and students that we support in their education journeys. At Aecc Global, we are proud to say that we've always continued our support for our students and institution partners during this period. We have also continued to run major online events and campaigns to support the recruitment of prospective new students. If your university or institutions would like to diversify its international education student mix, or like to partner with Aecc Global, please email us at clientrelations@aeccglobal.com. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you will gain some valuable insights from the panel of industry experts here. Thank you.
Great, and again, thanks to AECC for supporting this event. Before we jump into the panel, I want to just provide a bit of context for our conversation today through the lens of the THE Student Pulse. The THE Student Pulse is our global student panel community. Students from around the world have opted in to take part in research and provide a look into their international education journey. We can use the panel to support universities, governments, and other organizations with important insights directly from students. But of course, the insights are also useful to us as we plan events and content and as we seek to really understand what is happening in the international higher education world. Our panel currently comprises over 5,000 students, and actually this map is from a few weeks ago. It is growing every week, so I'm sure it's even larger than that at this point. And as you can see, it covers all corners of the globe. And we've been asking students about their top concerns around their study plans in light of COVID-19. We asked in terms of how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected prospective students. To what extent are the following a concern for you and your study plans? And as you can see here, probably unsurprisingly, funding still is a major concern for students, but we're also seeing things like what the overall experience will be like, health and safety, travel complications, getting to and from the university, appearing as concerns for students. Subsequently, we've asked, relative to earlier in the pandemic, approximately 6 to 8 months ago, are you now more concerned, less concerned, or have about the same level of concern regarding how the COVID-19 pandemic may affect your study plans? And the purple bar here represents students who indicated they were less concerned, and the blue bar more concerned. And as you can see, as the pandemic has gone on, health and safety, travel complications, the availability of funding, quality of online learning, whether or not they'll be able to engage in extracurricular activities, all sort of leaning toward that more concerned side of things. And I think what we're seeing here is that while these are certainly things that students would be concerned about and asking questions about prior to the pandemic, they are now front of mind, and they are perhaps now concerns that are really shaping the decisions that students are making about their study plans. Finally, I just want to share that at the end of 2020, we hosted several events for our student audience, and separate from the student panel, these are some of the questions that students submitted, some of the most common questions that students submitted at those events. We had 2 events that were each dedicated to comprehensive study abroad information about studying in the US, and then another event about studying in Canada. And you'll see that the questions here, some of them again are questions that students, of course, would have asked pre-pandemic, but lots of these common questions are really tied to concerns related to COVID-19. Things like, are universities less valuable now? Are there more or less scholarships available now because of the pandemic? In Canada, students who are considering studying there asking things like, can I use the national health system if I get sick with COVID? Or what if I become financially unfit during my studies? And I think this small sampling is certainly representative of the themes and the types of questions that we received from students during those 2 events. Again, some of these are definitely questions that students would have had pre-pandemic, but as evidenced in the previous slides, the concerns are now heightened due to the current circumstances. This is an incredibly brief sampling of insights from our Student Pulse and from the previous events that we hosted, but I think no one in the audience or on our panel today will be surprised by any of these questions or concerns. However, it does provide a bit of context for our conversation today. I know that we're going to talk quite a bit about the changing ways in which universities need to communicate with students and the ways that we need to be equipped to address a whole new set of increasing concerns. And with that little bit of scene setting, and without any further ado, I want to introduce our panelists and allow as much time as possible for conversation with them. Our contributors today are Amy Bass-Henry, Executive Director of the Office of International Education at Georgia Tech, Roger Brindley, Vice Provost for Global Programs at the Pennsylvania State University, MJ Knoll-Finn, Senior Vice President for Enrollment Management and Student Success at New York University, and Joe Wong, Interim Vice President International at the University of Toronto. Thank you so much for being here today and for giving of your time and your expertise. A big thank you also to our audience. We have a lot to cover, but I'd like to encourage the audience to submit your questions using the Q&A box. We'd also like you to submit any comments or experiences or thoughts relevant to the conversation using the Q&A function as well. We certainly want this to be as conversational and engaging as possible. I should also let you know that we'll break for some polls about halfway through our conversation, where we'll be seeking input and perspectives from the audience as well. So definitely keep an eye out for that. I think as we launch into our discussion today, it is of course important that we spend a lot of time looking forward and talking about what now and what should we expect in the coming year. But I think it's maybe best to start with looking back on the past 10 to 12 months and thinking about how universities have adapted and what you've learned from the past year. So Amy, we'll start with you. What do you think are some of the standout lessons and takeaways for universities from 2020?
Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are, to everyone. I think in 2020, some of the powerful lessons for universities in terms particularly of international students is that it's really critical that we consider them as core parts of our community. They're not add-ons, they're not revenue generators, they're essential and integral parts of our whole community. And when we integrate thinking about them in that way, into our institutions and thinking of them always as core members of our community, then our actions will follow and they'll push us to provide the support that they need to thrive. And they're also the same types of actions that are going to help us keep attracting international students to our institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, maybe we move to you to talk about, any other lessons you've learned, but then also how are we seeing those lessons that we learned now bear out in adjustments to recruitment strategies, and how have you sort of acted on and employed those things that you've learned?
Thanks so much. Let me just begin by reiterating Amy's, I think, very important point about understanding international students as being part of the fabric of what makes our universities globally facing. It is our international students, I think, are exemplary of the notion that diversity is excellence and that they represent a core mission or a core part of the mission of the university more generally, and certainly of the University of Toronto specifically. I think in terms of some lessons that we've learned, one of the things that strikes me is just really the ability to not only pivot very quickly. We all did this in the spring of 2020, where at our university on a Thursday, we were teaching 6,000 courses in person. By the following Monday, we were now teaching 6,000 plus courses online. So there was a real quick pivot that had to take place, but then recognizing that soon after that quick pivot, we needed to start planning. And we needed to start planning very strategically for the coming fall. So I'm sure I speak on behalf and reflect all institutions of higher learning that March 15th may have been the day that you pivoted very quickly, but likely on March 20th, you were already thinking about what September 2020 would look like. And so there was a lot of experimentation that took place. In the immediate time, in the near term, we had to ensure, for instance, a lot of our internationals or a lot of our students who were on international learning experiences somehow made their way home or back to Toronto. We needed to be sure that our international students who were on campus and specifically those living in our dorms were taken care of as well. And we needed to retrofit dorm life to ensure that students weren't left stranded. Throughout the whole course of the summer, we enlisted ed tech specialists and so forth, and really used our summer semester and our summer courses, which were actually oversubscribed this past year, as a way of really starting to experiment with how we might deliver our courses in the fall. In terms of recruitment, we learned very quickly the power of online platforms and really the ability in which we can leverage this online platform to reach markets and audiences that we likely would not have been able to reach before. So folks in the recruitment business know that it's a very person-to-person intensive kind of work, and that we can't replace, obviously, with these online platforms. But we're now able to reach many more students, prospective students, our own international students, existing ones, and families in ways that we haven't been able to do before. And at our institution, specifically at U of T, we've actually seen a sizable increase in the number of international applications for the coming year. In fact, a 22% increase. And also a much more diverse range in terms of source countries. So I think that there are some, advantages that have come out of this, or at least some lessons and some platforms that we can leverage to reach audiences that we've not reached before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a long time, there's been a lot of resistance to virtual recruiting. And in a way, the circumstances in 2020 sort of just forced everyone into that realm, and everyone just sort of had to quickly adapt to that. But I think, for a long time, there've been a lot of opportunities for virtual engagement and recruitment out there, and they've been a little bit slow to catch on. And then, of course, this year, everyone just sort of thrust into it, and now really seeing the value in that. I'm conscious that one of the challenges over the past year also had to do with sort of this constant moving of the goalposts, right? We never exactly knew, when are we going to get back to traveling? When will students be able to return to campus? MJ, can you tell us a little bit about how you and your office and all of your admissions teams and recruiters have coped with that sort of need to readjust expectations and readjust the plans almost on a constant basis over the past year?
Yeah, well, I think we're all a little exhausted right now, but yeah, first of all, I just want to say too that I echo both Joe and Amy's comments, and it's I think when you're engaged with the international population, both the students, but also all of the folks who support them in getting to your campuses, you have the same kinds of responses for how you manage in a crisis like this. And I think what we did was we sort of, we leaned into the disruption, right? So I think when you're in this space, you have to already think pretty creatively because you have a recruitment staff trying to get across the globe all the time, and that is a challenge. And I think, as you said, Jamie, there has been a resistance in higher education in general to the virtual space, whether it's teaching or it is these moments of recruitment. And also it has been a challenge at times with the college counseling community to figure out how we do this well. And because we were all in it, we leaned in and we really were able to rely on that network of folks across the globe who were seeking some answers from us for their high school students trying to find us and all of the things that they were worried about because their lives were disrupted. And that's a moment that is distinctive, right? I think we'll all look back on this together and say quite distinctive. So we leaned in and we said, now we're not limited to time and space, and we have everybody else in it with us. And so I think we created some core principles around that because the staff was anxious. And I think we were all trying to figure out how to do this quickly. And I think Joe said a lot of things that we were also looking at and had to kind of learn over the summer as we were going into our fall recruitment cycles, and also with our current students, what they were worrying about. But I think the guiding principles for us were you had to be clear and consistent in communication. As crazy as it was behind the scenes at times as we were trying to figure things out, we wanted to go out with that calming force that helped students feel like we had their backs, right? And we were there for them. And as Joe said, we also were able to get into spaces and meet students we had never met before. So for us, we had a 32% increase in the number of international students who attended our virtual events versus our in-person events the year before, right? That's huge. And so it says to us that there were some things about that effort that really paid off in getting to students who might not have been able to see NYU. We also got to lean into our global network. And so having people on the ground, we have 12 global sites that actively function all year round. And we also have 2 degree granting campuses in Abu Dhabi and Shanghai. Having people on the ground was incredibly helpful. So that global network of academics and of staff members and students was also something we tapped so that we could understand the challenges in China of being in the virtual network, right? Or the challenges in some of our countries that are not as wealthy in having internet access so that we could then try to adjust our recruitment. And so again, the third principle was listening, a lot of listening, which we were able to do in this virtual space in a way that we had never been able to do before. And so we could pivot quickly the way we were recruiting students and create niche little recruitment efforts that were quick, easy to upload, get ready, and then target audiences in a way you just couldn't do when you were in person because travel is expensive and it is slow and cumbersome. And so, so for us, it's been really leaning into social media, really leaning into listening channels, and then learning as we went, as you've heard already, to continually pivot how we were managing. And like Toronto, we have 23,000 plus applicants who are international, huge diversity in that pool this year, and a 23% increase over last year. So definitely paid off that ability to sort of reach students in a different way.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you and Joe have both highlighted that point about being able to reach students and families and schools and just pockets of prospective students that you never would have reached by just being on the ground and doing traditional, travel boots on the ground recruiting. So if there is a silver lining to all of this, it is that you've been able to sort of diversify your applicant pool from your living rooms, which is amazing. However, I will say that there's a lot of commentary, and there has been for years, about the United States particularly, but I think it also applies in some respects to Canada, that there's an over-dependence on a few particular source markets for students. And I do think what has happened over the past year has shaken that up a little bit. But Roger, I wonder if we can turn to you, and I'm just going to point blank ask the question: do you think that the US and Canada rely too heavily on certain international markets, and how do you think the way we've changed what we do in the past year is going to impact that?
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you to my colleagues. Terrific comments, and I echo them all. Yes, we're overly dependent, Jamie. Absolutely we are. There are myriad reasons for that, but let me just share a couple of thoughts that might help the folks who are listening in. We know in the United States today that between China and India, that's half of the students who are enrolled into the United States. And I know it's similar in Canada in many ways. I think that we have a challenge coming out of COVID. That one of the lessons to be learned from COVID is that mobility is probably going to be redefined. We certainly know that we have a situation where we can do more online teaching, more modes of delivery, but we also know from our students in the COVID era that a combination of synchronous and asynchronous online learning is extremely difficult. They struggle with it. They've struggled. And so we've got a lot to learn. We've got a lot to improve in our digital delivery systems. And then you have the issue of, well, how do you create more diverse student recruitment from around the world? You know, it's fair to say in the United States, one critique could be that we have created business models, and inevitably that has resulted in us primarily bringing in the financial elite to study in our country before we offer fellowships, scholarships, assistantships, and the like. I think we need to think about equity and access. We talk in the United States a lot today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think we need to think about access as well. And what would it mean, for instance, to create online entrees into graduate programs so that students only had to come for 12 calendar months or 9 calendar months to finish their degree? What would it take to build our academic articulations with our key university partners around the world so that we can be with our students in their cultural environment? I think that's particularly true at the graduate level, where issues of sustainability and societal change need to be addressed. Applied research for nation building, capacity building needs to be addressed within the authentic cultures of the location, not necessarily at a nice big university in the United States. So the way we think about it at Penn State is, how can we build our partnerships? How can we also think about lowering the financial hurdle for students? And that may not mean we can create a myriad of different tuition schedules, but maybe we can think of thoughtful, intense experiences, summer programs, certificate programs, and the like. And I noted from your student pulse, Jamie, the importance of employability and career prospects for students. I think we need to think long and hard about what that work looks like, and what virtual internships look like, practicums look like, so that we give the students a value-added proposition and a degree of confidence that upon graduation, we will assist them, we will support their efforts to be successful in the next chapters of their lives. So I realize graduation is a long way from recruitment, but I do think of it as cyclical. And I do think there's a need for our institutions to build up that case, to build that data, and then to present that as we think about recruiting prospective students. So for me, it's a cyclical cycle. So I'll stop there. There are lots of other ideas, but that seems a good place to start.
Jamie, may I just add a little, if that's all right?
Of course.
Roger, I really appreciate your answer, and I love the creativity, and I love the principled commitment that underpins it. And if I were to respond to your question, Jamie, I would say, you know, the question of overdependence is a question that connotes risk, right? And we all understand the financial risks involved in being overdependent on any source market. But what if we were to complement that narrative, maybe even change that narrative, and understand international student recruitment and international student diversification as enlivening our campuses, that the value proposition to the university in having a globally diverse student population are the incredible learning experiences that our students will have, the incredible diversity of opinions and lived experiences that will animate our classrooms, the global networks that these students will have as alumnus. And importantly, also, we know employers are seeking students with these kinds of global experiences. So this increases the likelihood that they will be able to seek really meaningful, impactful work after they graduate. So rather than thinking about, and of course we have to, we're all university administrators and academic leaders, we worry about the financial system, the financial situation of our institutions. But what if we were to change the narrative and actually highlight what Roger's talked about, what I've just laid out as being the core value proposition of this entire endeavor? I think that could be really, really impactful. And indeed, to Roger's point about accessibility, I think that if we are to be true to that mission, then indeed we do have to think about access. And at U of T, for instance, this past year, really, really pleased that our faculty divisions, our academic divisions, have created a whole slew of full ride international scholarships, which are very expensive, as you can imagine. But they're targeting regions of the world that are underrepresented and may not have the ability. We know price sensitivity has gone up as a result of COVID. We knew it was always there to begin with. But that's one mechanism by which we are fulfilling the broader mission and being true to our word, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us as academic leaders to start changing the conversation a little bit that could be really impactful in the long run. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. We have a comment from the audience about, suggesting that, actually funding and employability were common questions and concerns even before COVID. Employability, return on investment has always been top of mind for students, particularly as students are looking at, an incredibly significant investment in pursuing a degree. But one of Christina in the audience has suggested that we should actually draw attention to the fact that the student experience has now become a concern, and students are sort of voicing this concern around what is my experience going to be like on campus. We hosted actually last week for our student audience a panel of current international students talking about their experience. 3 of them were in the US, 1 in Canada, and all but 1 of them were currently on their university campuses. And they were incredibly positive and just thrilled to be on campus. But I couldn't help but notice as they were talking about their experience, how different it must be from what they thought their university experience would be like. Most of them were first-year students. Some of them had just arrived on campus for the first time in the past few weeks. And they were saying things like, yeah, it's great, but we can't have any social gatherings. We can't go to sporting events. I'm actually not going to most of my classes. I'm sitting in my residence hall or in my student accommodation learning virtually. And although they seemed, again, incredibly positive and happy to be on campus, I do have to wonder if that experience is going to have an impact on students who are now looking at enrolling in the coming year, thinking, well, what's the point in really going if I'm just going to be sitting in my residence hall learning virtually? And how do you think that this perception of what the student experience is like has changed and will change students' desires to study at a university in Canada or the US? Amy, do you want to start with that one?
Sure, I can start. So I don't think it's going to change their interest in studying in the US or Canada in the long term. We will get through the pandemic and life on college campuses will add back in all the elements possible when possible. I think even now, I had an email from a student yesterday who I was just checking in on. And I said, how's it going? It must be so different than you thought. He came in August and he was like, oh, I don't know what it was like before, but it's great. Sure, I only have 1 in-person class, but I still get to meet with other students. I'm living on campus. So I think that, some of it is about perspective for students also. And I think wherever people are who we're trying to recruit at this point, their lives probably look different right now, and they're expecting things to open up and improve wherever they are. And they have to be somewhat understanding of the fact that it's the same here. We have managed on our campus to keep 8,000 students living on campus. And we have really aggressive testing and masking and social distancing requirements. And, up until now, we have managed to keep things running and operating with a virtual learning model. Certainly, we're not able to offer all the kinds of opportunities we did before, but we're offering all of them that we can, right? And really trying to be supportive of students and their well-being. And what I would hope in terms of attracting future students is that our current students, who future students hear from more than they hear from us, I'm sure, that they're relaying that, yeah, this really is crappy that most of my classes are online, or I'm in my room a lot, only with maybe my roommate, but that I'm still able to do these other things, and that the learning is still happening, because ultimately the whole experience is part of the college package, but there is a core, and it is the learning towards the degree that they're here to get.
Yeah, you're right, and I think it really is important to continue to highlight that, you know, they're still getting the quality of education that they signed up for when they chose your institution. MJ, how do you, moving into the coming year as you're recruiting students, and obviously there's a lot of uncertainty around when campus life will return to, you know, something that looks a bit more like pre-COVID campus life. So how do you manage that message to prospective students about what it may or may not be like? I mean, we all are doing a little bit of crystal ball gazing. We really don't know exactly when things are going to go back to normal. And so how do you manage that message and that communication with prospective students about what their experience might be like when they come to campus?
Yeah. Well, I want to just also emphasize what Joe spoke to earlier, because I agree. You know, part of what makes NYU such an amazing place to work at within this global context is because 22% of our undergraduates are international students. That's a large portion of the campus. And so to Joe's point, that is a value statement. That is because we believe deeply in the diversity that our international students bring, and we look the same at our racial diversity. But I think it's an important comment, and I want to underline it maybe, because I think it's just such an important part of what drives us. And to that point you just made, a question you just asked me, Jamie, I think that what we do is we start when we speak to anybody, whether it's our own internal community who's trying to plan, and then the community outside who needs to know what we're planning, right? And because I do enrollment management, I'm looking at both recruitment and at our current students. And so an enrollment manager in the US is often in between the sort of need to have enrollment, and as everyone has spoken to, we're fiscally responsible for that at our institutions. But at the other side, we're communicators, and we're often looking at what people don't know, don't see, and what they need to understand. And so your question's great, because I think what we do is we start with guiding principles. What's the guiding principle? Like for right now at NYU, our guiding principle is we are going to try to be as much in person as we can be in the fall, but health is always going to be our number one priority, everyone's health. So, and we have facts. If you're teaching in the United States and in New York, you can have a vaccination. If you're in Abu Dhabi right now, they're all being vaccinated. If you're in Shanghai, vaccinations are happening. So letting the community know this is how it looks right now, but these are the things we don't know. So what we don't know are, can students all be vaccinated? If you're from another country, will we have lifted all the issues, the visa challenges that students have right now? We don't know that. And so what we do know is we have a global network, and we use that in something we called Go Local. So with these 13 sites overseas, or 14 sites overseas, we were able to allow international students to come to our local campuses to study in person, even if they were taking courses in New York. And so it's not, as you said, it is not perfect. That is not what they signed up for, but it is a better option for many. And our guiding principle, in addition to wanting to be in person, is flexibility. We try to put a few choices in front of students that we can manage academically and administratively. And then we let the students make the choices about what they would like to choose. And that will continue to be a guiding principle for us. We want you back, but if you can't be back, we'll be there for you. And so the best we can do is sort of lay that out. And I think a lot of the work I'm doing right now is trying to lay out all those timelines to make sure that we're telling our audiences, our different key audiences, what we know when we can let you know, and what you can count on. And so that's the sort of, that's the way we're approaching it. And so far it's worked, but I do meditate every day, and I keep reminding myself that this chaos is going to pass. And my job is to just stay very focused, and we have to be the calm guiding lights that help everybody get to what the end game is.
I think perhaps for everyone, this has all been a very good lesson, and focus on the things that you can control and the certainties that you do have, and let those, as you said, be sort of your guiding principles, because there is so much that we can't control and so much that we can't foresee. We have a question from the audience, and Roger, I'm going to toss this one to you. Our audience member asks, given the "you are not welcome here" perception that has been created in the US over the past years for international students and the adverse conditions created by the pandemic, what are some of the steps that universities should be taking to play a role in changing that perception and welcoming back students and making sure that students really do feel welcome and encouraged to apply to universities in the US?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so thank you for that. I think the first thing we have to do is acknowledge it, Jamie. In fact, at the institution I work at Penn State, we're very purposefully and strategically communicating our admitted students for the fall of 2021 that they are welcome. And we're doing that through a series of mechanisms. One is through social media and student voice, and the experience that students are having, and the ways that we work to care for our students as whole students. And I think that's really important, that as we're recruiting, we recognize the co-curricular as well as the curricular ambitions of the student. Another way we're doing that is we've very overtly talked to students about what we see happening in the change in administration. So the fact that the duration of status rule was killed, or at least timed out, we've overtly said to them, please know, you will get a visa for duration of status. And I think we have to do that. I'll tell you that we've, maybe not directly in the recruiting sphere, but in the associated support mechanisms, we've worked very hard with our government relations people, very intentional in our language to our legislature and state, and in our federal capital in Washington. So I think the simple answer to "you are not welcome" is you are welcome. You were always welcome, and you are welcome, and here we are, and this is how we care. And some of the ways that I mean, we always did parent meetings, right, online, but boy, have we been doing parent meetings the last 12 months, and a far more, of an intentional client-based relationship with students. You want to Zoom, you want to Skype, you want to WeChat, you got it, and I think we have to sort of help get the message, you're welcome, one student at a time, but also very intentionally make sure that we are communicating that out in our strategies.
Yeah, it's, I think you're right in that it has to be communicated consistently and constantly, and to both students and parents. Unfortunately, I think universities, fortunately, I think universities have been standing by that message for a very, very long time. But unfortunately, I think the perception has sort of circumvented that. And so it's really important for universities to just say, as you said, you are welcome here. You have always been welcome here on our campuses and in our communities. It's a really important message, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so the number one language newspaper in India, the Times of India, number one English language newspaper in India, excuse me, on the 6th of January, or the 7th of January, actually, the headline stamped across the front of the Times of India was showing the insurrection at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. And the headline title was Ku Klux Klan, C-O-U-P, Ku Klux Klan. And that kind of media, we have to intentionally disrupt that media. If we don't, that media will win every time.
Yeah, you're right. And I think universities have a big role to play in terms of combating those messages, which unfortunately seem to come thick and fast. There's a few more questions from the audience that I definitely want to get to, and one from Scott Lee in the audience that sort of refers back to a conversation we were having a few minutes ago about the virtual experience that students are having. And I want to make sure that we keep the conversation focused around recruitment and the messages that we're giving to prospective international students. But I think that this is a really important one to talk about, because we've talked about the difficulties that students have had, learning virtually, and perhaps we are perceiving those difficulties more than the students are. Amy, as you said, the students seem to be quite happy with the quality of education that they're receiving and the experience that they're having. But Scott's question asks, how can universities better facilitate social connections and a sense of belonging for students? It was mentioned already that there's some feedback that virtual learning doesn't seem that bad, especially for students who maybe don't know anything differently, right? If they're first-year students on your campus, they don't have anything to compare it to. But we don't really have to look that deep in university subreddits to see students are struggling with connecting with their classmates, connecting with their faculty members, having that really personal connection. I think as it relates to recruitment, it's going to be a concern that a lot of students have. They're leaving, they're international students going very far from home, and they want to feel like they're going to be able to sort of make a connection with other students and have a support network. Joe, do you want to start and talk a little bit about how we can support students and how we can create a rhetoric of community and connectedness among students, even during a time when most of what we're doing is virtual?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. I mean, the short answer would be to say it's hard. I mean, let's not kid ourselves, right? I think that every institution represented here and around the world is doing everything they possibly can, creating virtual platforms for students to engage with one another, to having online physical activity, yoga classes, and so forth that I'm sure all institutions are doing. But in the end, it's hard. And I think that one of the ways in which, as you say, how do we create a narrative about what we're doing? It's really to create a narrative around adaptiveness and recognizing that institutions, universities, even though they're large, sometimes they're clunky, they can be very agile, and that we may not have all the answers in September 2020, but we certainly have more answers now in February 21, and we'll have even better answers in fall 21. And so I think it's important to convey to students that what they are hearing or seeing now is being listened to, and that institutions are going to adapt as best they can. As we look forward to the fall of 21, I mean, one scenario, of course, depending on the success of the vaccine rollout in various jurisdictions, is that we may approach something near normal. And if we're not at near normal, I think it's worth reminding students that your college career is a 4-year experience, and that you may be joining us in fall 21. But hopefully in spring 22, things will look very different. And indeed, by fall 22, things will have gone back to normal. And I would even say better than normal, because we've learned so much and we've learned new ways to do things that the student experience will be enhanced. All that being said, I think one of the important things that we've been communicating to all of our students, especially our international students, is the centrality and importance of mental health for our students. And I think that's really important to convey, not only in word, but in deed as well. So at U of T, for instance, we've accelerated the rollout of our mental health counseling services now that can be conducted in every language, so that students are able to call and speak with a counselor in a language that they feel most comfortable with. Now, again, this is something that should be there anyway. But it's certainly something that has been really accelerated in the midst of COVID. We are talking with all of our faculty members. It's interesting, faculty meetings, in my faculty meetings, it used to be about, what room are you going to be in? Or, do you need a smart desk or not? Those sorts of questions. Now all of our conversations are around a caring mindset, and how do you talk to faculty members and instructors about building a caring mindset in their approach to teaching, and what does that mean, again, in practice? more office hours, more availability for one-on-one consultations, having a little more leniency when it comes to students handing in their work, recognizing the challenges that students are facing as they are trying to, pursue their studies across 12 different time zones. A caring mindset, I think, goes a long way in terms of setting the tone for how a course is designed and indeed how it's carried out. So that's a longer way of talking about some of the things that are going on and some of the approaches that we're taking. But I think if we were to all be honest, it's hard. And we are all hoping for a more normal fall of 21, because that's what we know how to do. And indeed, that's what students are looking for.
The audience couldn't see, but I could see MJ and Amy nodding their heads along with that sentiment. MJ, did you want to add something?
Just very quickly, because I think that, what Joe just laid out is really the approach. And one of the things that we kind of added on to that was we also do a pulse survey for our students, 6 questions. So really quick, so we can get a sense of what's going on with them. We do it 3 times a term, and that just started because of COVID. That has allowed us 2 of those questions directly asked. Do you need we have a series of, we call them student success folks. So they're not mental health counselors. And I think what Joe spoke to is a very specific and important part. But this is really just, a little lighter and more a guidepost, right? And so we may get them to mental health counseling, because that actually might be what they need, but it's a way to connect quickly using technology. So I just wanted to add that the thing that I feel we've been able to do and capitalize on is getting more comfort. My equation is data, technology, and people. And so to me, that was a big part, and caring, obviously, under all of it, students first. But it has helped us a lot. And I think we've been challenged to, community is always a challenge. I think it's always a challenge. I don't care how, I've worked at big and small schools, community for students is a challenge. And I think this is giving us a bigger toolbox that we may be able to use. So one last thing is we just started something called Connect to a Friend. And it's a technical way, and people are signing up for it. And then we're connecting groups. It's so fun. And it's just, and they're thankful for the ones who are responding. So we're trying new things, again, layering on top of what Joe was speaking about, using technology to help us because they're not in front of us. So just some additional thoughts on that. And especially in the global space, as Roger said, using the various tools that they use too, not always just one way of getting it to them on that social media platform.
Yeah, Joe, you said something about universities being so agile and able to adapt quickly, and I think it's funny that you said that, because I think for so long we have thought of universities as trying to turn a cruise ship, that it can be, there's a lot of red tape and a lot of bureaucracy, and it can often be difficult to make changes to the ways that you do things. I worked at a university for a number of years in international recruitment, and I remember having loads of those battles internally to get things changed. And it has been amazing to watch over the past year how quickly they can change and things can get done, and they can adapt for the best interests of their students and their faculty members when it's necessary. It's wonderful. And I hope it's a good lesson that universities have learned, that actually it is possible for us to do things really quickly and to make these changes when they're necessary. It's really reassuring.
Could I just to add to that, though, I want to stress that agility does not get us off the hook for being thoughtful. It's really a mix of both. And it's amazing what a pandemic will do in terms of sort of revving your engines to make that cruise ship turn a little more quickly, but really being thoughtful. I think I still marvel. We have this quarantine program at U of T, which there have been no cases of transmission. And it's unbelievable the thoughtfulness that went into this. I still recall a call one night from the vice provost student saying, do you think we need to get SIM cards for all the students coming in? Because how else are they going to, and I said, yeah, I think we need some, and and the next day, SIM cards are in all the welcome packages, right? The amount of detailed thinking that went into that quarantine, our safe and secure corridor is what we call it, is unbelievable and fast at the same time. Agile, but extremely thoughtful. So yeah, it's amazing what a pandemic will do to an institution.
I have a question, and Amy, I'm going to give this to you from the audience, going back to the conversation we were having a few minutes ago about employment and return on investment and outcomes, and making sure that that conversation is prominent, particularly for prospective international students. Michael in the audience asked, on the conversation on education and employment, can you share some thoughts on the visa and OPT schemes and how much this weighs on international student recruitment to the US?
Yeah, so I mean, OPT is incredibly important in terms of recruitment in the US. I mean, international students want to have the opportunity during, if possible, and certainly after completing a degree, to be able to pursue internships or early career positions. And so for the last few years, when there was threat to the OPT program, that was a really significant and scary threat, both because it not just because it would impact recruitment, but it was impacting the lives of our students who are already here, and not taking us in really a good direction for helping support international students and being able to pursue the co-curricular, the internships and experiential kinds of learning opportunities that they might want to pursue while they're with us. So, you know, I don't think there's any reason to think that OPT will be under threat for the next few years. And it is a real asset to universities. For us in particular, we have one of the largest populations of students doing OPT in the United States, because our students, most of them are also eligible for the STEM extension. So we're not a top 10 in terms of number of international students, but we are absolutely a top 10 in terms of users of OPT. And so it remains really important that we give students those opportunities that are on equal footing, right, with US students. US students get to do those things. And so we want to make sure that the international students have those same opportunities for the experiential learning during and or after graduation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right that, you know, OPT continues to be something that universities want to and should be highlighting for international students. It's a huge draw, and it helps students sort of see that path to employability and outcomes after their degree.
Yeah, Jamie, and if I could, I'll just say one more thing about that's closely tied to where we began of in integrating international students into the fabric of our community. And that means things like career services being available to them and the staff being able to really work with them and think about their particular needs and make sure that they're being as well served as other populations on our campuses.
Yeah, definitely. We have loads more questions from the audience and more questions from me, but we're going to take a quick break to put some polls up for our audience. We want to get some insight and input from those who are in attendance today. So you will see on your screen in just a second, if you can just either open a new tab in your web browser or use your mobile device to go to sli.do. And then you'll see a box in the top for you to enter that code AECCNA for North America. We'll give everybody just a second to do that. And what we're going to do is just gather some of your perspectives and input on some of these issues. Give everybody a few seconds to get connected to Slido. Let's go ahead and pull up the first question. First question is, from which countries are you noticing the biggest decline in student recruitment? Choices are China, India, Vietnam, Nepal, Brazil, Colombia, or others. Give just a second for folks to come in. I love watching all of this come in live. And we can see at the top we've had 30 responses, and overwhelmingly the answer is China. And we've already kind of talked on the dependence on China, but I know that in the US, early numbers from the Common Application are actually showing a pretty steep decline in applications from China. So what everyone is reporting here is definitely reflected in the numbers of applications. I think we can go to the next question. On 2019 student numbers, what percentage of international student commencements at your institution have declined or decreased in 2020? 75% or more, 50%, 25%, or less than 25%? Again, we'll give just a second for folks to key in their answers. So interesting, because I watched also a similar session that we did earlier today for universities in the UK, and a lot of this, I think we talk about how we're seeing it in North America, in the United States, and in Canada, but a lot of the polling results looked very similar this morning in the session for the UK. So obviously, so much of this is global trends. Less than 25% seems to be the overwhelming answer here, which is good news. The next question: during the pandemic, what has been the preferred method of engagement with students via your in-house recruitment? Entirely online, a hybrid of face-to-face and online, or primarily face-to-face? Probably no surprise here that there's been very limited opportunity for face-to-face engagement with students, and so the majority are saying entirely online. And I think we can, as we've discussed, expect that or some combination of face-to-face and online is going to continue for a little while. The next question is, when it comes to education agent partners, what is most important to you? Strong online student engagement capabilities, increasing student numbers, global footprint, student quality, or innovative marketing strategies? And thanks to everyone in the audience who's participating in this poll. It's providing certainly great insight for THE and AECC, but also good insight to inform the rest of our conversation today. Great, I think we can move on to the next question. The fifth question here is, what is your sentiment toward major sub-agent platforms that are increasingly growing in the market? Very positive, positive, neutral, negative, or very negative? And the next question: by what year do you believe student recruitment will return to pre-COVID levels? 2022, 23, 24, 25, or not sure? And again, with the gazing into a crystal ball, I guess none of us really know, but it's good to get a sense of when we're all hoping or assuming that things will go back to pre-COVID levels. Most saying 2023, handful a bit more optimistic saying 2022. And the next question: how do you currently feel about international student recruitment? Optimistic, not sure, or pessimistic? So far, everyone optimistic, a handful not sure. I certainly think the conversation we've been having today should help everyone feel optimistic. Our panelists have all been incredibly optimistic about how things are going on their campuses and the numbers that they're seeing. So that's all great news. And this is our final question: which international market are you prioritizing in terms of student recruitment now in light of the pandemic? The choices are China, India, Southeast Asia, South America, Middle East, Africa, or other countries or regions. Excellent. thank you to everyone in the audience who contributed your perspectives and insights to the poll. That's incredibly helpful, and we really appreciate that. I want to get back to our conversation, and Joe, I'm actually going to come back to you. We have another question from the audience specifically about U of T. Can you speak to the increase in applications at U of T in relation to an overall decrease in application numbers across Canada? Perhaps international students are really looking more closely at the bigger universities during these uncertain times, but would love to have your insight on that.
That's a great question. I mean, this is something that we probably want to talk to prospective students who put in their applications to U of T to get a better sense of where their preferences are. I mean, I think that hypothesis is reasonable. And, you know, the notion of studying in a big city and a big multicultural city may be also attractive to international students. I mean, I think when we look at our own figures and doing the analysis, you know, the conclusions that we would draw is that this is really, a consequence of a strategic plan and years of investment. It's not as though our numbers in terms of regional distributions are being reshaped drastically. We are seeing more diversity, but not in any drastic way. I think this really is just a function of having had recruiters out in markets for many years. And we know in the international recruitment game, it's about getting a foothold into a certain region and then developing a brand within that region. And so it takes years for the numbers to actually start, those efforts to start bearing fruit. So I would say it's probably more of a consequence of that, at least the U of T story. I can't speak for other institutions in Canada. I mean, in general, at least in some of the data that we've had a chance to look at, with respect to Canadian institutions more generally, brand Canada is very strong. It's quite interesting, actually. There was some data that we looked at that was looking at the 4 major English language markets, Canada, the US, the UK, and Australia. And Canada stood out in terms of student preferences in that students chose Canadian institutions because of Canada. And they were less likely to choose an institution or to study in Canada based on a specific institution. So, you know, at least that data would suggest that the institution itself, the university, matters less, but that Canada itself is a more attractive destination for those who are inclined to study in Canada in the first place.
One of the things we're also hearing is that students are applying to more countries than previously. So where pre-pandemic a student may have just applied to only universities in the US, they may now be also applying to the US and Canada, and maybe even also the UK or their home country. And I wonder what this does to yield efforts and to plans for actually enrolling students, particularly as we head into the spring months and that critical period of students making final decisions. MJ, do you want to talk a little bit about yield strategies within the recruitment cycle and what you guys are doing to prepare for any uncertainty around how that may play out this year?
Well, welcome to my world. That's what we deal with every year. That is not new. That is just a new year. And I applaud that. You know, I think competition and having students thinking through what's a good match for me and all of the things that we want deeply for students to be making good decisions. You know, at the end of the day, my job is to enroll a class, but really my job is to hope that students are finding us because we're a good fit for them, and they would choose us if that were to happen. But in the yield modeling, we deal in risk. So we look at, well, how do you mitigate the risk of over yielding or under yielding? Because either one can be pretty difficult in a situation where you're trying to build classes, and especially in this year where we're coming off students that have taken a leave of absences, and you're going to have this kind of rush of students coming back, we believe, in the fall, as we hope we're more in what we might all consider in-person, more normal functioning. So, but going to your question about how do we manage this? So what we do is we build wait lists at NYU to make sure that we have mitigated the risk of not enrolling enough, so we can build that up. And we also rely on our models, but it's kind of econometric modeling, right? So you're looking at who are you admitting, What do you know about what's going on right now in the world? What do you know about who you have in your admit pool from the countries they're in, and what might be the challenges? So I am spending probably twice as much time with my data team as we look at who we're admitting into the classes to really dig in and understand what could be the implications regionally, what could be the implications on yield, what we know economically that's happening across the world, and as Amy was speaking earlier about your ability to get in and out of countries and your ability to persist, right? And our students also have shown us that they are persisting. So our current students, yes, this is tough. Yes, this is hard, but their hopes and dreams haven't changed. And so unlike Joe's comment about Canada, in New York is a big draw, NYU is a big draw, our global footprint, we have these three campuses where students are applying to, we're seeing increases everywhere. And I think that they want to be at NYU. And I'm not saying that, you know, like, oh, aren't we great? I'm saying that that's in my model. I say, okay, well, they really are telling us they're interested in us. So I have the ability to look at those patterns and to use my counseling staff who is on the ground and incredibly talented at understanding what's happening across the globe. But I think all of us, there's a real integrity in our work to understanding the students who want to be at our campuses. And there's a super, I think that for them, the sort of our commitment is to understand as best we can what's happening for them in their own home countries. And that helps us in our modeling, but I think it helps us more in how we welcome them to our campuses. So it's a nice kind of quanti and then also human kind of way that we work. And that's why I love what I do. That's why you're hearing a lot of hope and optimism, because the students give us that. You know, they teach me every day that persistence and hope go hand in hand. And so that's, anyway, that's getting my little soapbox about what I think is great about young people. But that's how we do it. We're looking at patterns after pattern after pattern, and then doing some mitigation on risk side.
Yeah, great. It is, I mean, as you said, predicting yield and understanding what your class is actually going to look like is difficult every year, but I think perhaps layered with just some extra nuance this year in particular. We've talked about how we've adapted and changed the way that we connect with prospective international students virtually. We've talked just now a little bit about yield. We've talked about the experience on campus, but we've missed a sort of significant part of the process, which is the actual application process and how that has had to adapt and change. And obviously one of the major elements of that is testing. A lot of international students in particular have found it difficult or impossible to complete English language tests, to complete standardized tests. And obviously universities have had to respond to those challenges and be flexible with those requirements. Roger, can you tell us a little bit about flexibility around international student specific requirements like English language testing and how universities have responded and adapted to those challenges?
Sure, I'm happy to. I just reflect that some of what we've done, we probably should have been doing all along, and maybe we were, and we've just got more focused around it. I'm particularly thinking of our graduate students here. So we've gone test optional in terms of SAT, ACT, GRE, GMAT, and all of those testing. But I'm struck at the graduate level. Our admits are actually up at the grad level this year, and I squarely put the credit in the hands of the faculty. I think they've been far more proactive in reaching out, in establishing communication, asking students what they're looking for, reassuring them when necessary. And in some of our programs, those programs with fellowships and scholarships, some of our doctoral programs being far more sort of intentional around interviewing. I've really appreciated it, you know, and great credit to them. The days of, you know, just having a quick look at where they did their undergraduate work and what it was in, and you know, those days are over. I credit our faculty for really being far more thoughtful and personally engaged. I think they understand that will come back and benefit their programs their graduate programs in very real ways. The undergraduate level, we run a lot more just sort of virtual style, sort of open house, open forum, and we're trying to make ourselves as available as possible. Particularly as we talk towards, you're talking about enrollment yield there, there are so many questions that students have about I-20s and at the best of times and the process at the best of times. And we're really trying to take a case-based approach now with individuals. And that involves reaching out to embassies and consulates to see their status around interviewing schedules. We all have high hopes for August, but by golly, those consulates are going to have to be open in May and June. So a lot of sort of extra sort of effort at personal touch. I've been listening to all my colleagues here, and I wrote down the word care. I think we're all trying to demonstrate that we care for the students and that we want what's best for the students. So at the undergraduate, that's a really important message. At the graduate level, that's being conveyed almost on a one-to-one basis now.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Demonstrating that care can be in those personal connections, but it's also in about adjusting policies that demonstrate that you understand what challenges students are facing. I mean, that also reflects a great sense of care. And so, of course, those personal conversations and that personal touch is important, but it's also reflected in sort of wider policies and decisions that you're making as an institution.
Yeah, and if I may, just one more thing, Jamie, just to compound because of COVID, because we're also watching those freshman year retention rates extremely carefully, because we're going to have to orient a whole class of sophomores as well as freshmen, and a whole class of second year master's students as well as new master's students. And so we're really beginning to think now about that co-curriculum and the student engagement piece of this very carefully with a view to the fall.
The audience, again, can't see, but the rest of the panelists definitely nodding their heads along with that sentiment that, there's a lot to look out for, and that those retention rates are certainly one of them. We have about 10 minutes left, and what I would love to do, we certainly did not get to all of the questions and comments from the audience, but what I really would like to do is just have each of you share a few words about your predictions for the future of higher education in the US and Canada, particularly in the coming year or two, recovering from harmful rhetoric about international students, particularly in the US, recovering from COVID. What are your predictions for how universities are going to bounce back, and what international students and higher education is going to look like? Amy, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Jamie. I think in terms of predicting the future of higher ed and its attractability to international students, that the heart of what makes our institutions great has not changed. It's been tested, and we've changed many of our processes and our ways of doing things, but our core mission and our values have not changed. They're what made us attractive in the past, and as the world is recovering from the pandemic in due time, I mean, it's not tomorrow, of course, but I think the US and Canada will remain coveted study away sites. The magic, at least in research universities, of having research, teaching, and service all together supporting each other isn't gone. And it'll be newly evident really what the power of that, again, in the coming months and years. I mean, MJ has referenced a few times thinking about your values and what you're working towards. And one of the things that we've done here at Georgia Tech is we actually released a new strategic plan in November. Yes, in the middle of a pandemic, a new strategic plan. And we put our values in it. And they're really similar to lots of North American universities as well as other universities. That helps make them really attractive. Students are our top priority. It's excellence, diversity, collaboration, innovation, safeguarding freedom of inquiry and expression, one thing we added different from the past was well-being of our community as one of our core values, and of course being ethical, and as a public institution being responsible stewards. So I think whatever, however similar or shorter maybe some other value lists are, that using those as the guiding principles is going to help us keep really being beacons and attracting amazing students to come to our universities.
Great. Joe, your predictions for the future?
Oh, that sounds too weighty. My predictions for the future. I think I might have a mix of prediction and maybe aspiration. I think that one of the things that's really come out of the COVID pandemic is a lot of soul searching within the university as an institution in terms of our broader impact and our global impact. And I think there's a real opportunity here, and we're seeing institutions of higher learning really take on that challenge in articulating what it is that we do and the global impact that we can have. And everything from vaccine discovery to public policy to logistics management to public health messaging to behavioral psychology. I think that the arts, I think that universities are really putting themselves in a position to have that kind of global impact. And what I hope comes out of that actually is more international collaboration between our institutions as we look around at some of the geopolitical headwinds that our governments are confronted with. There is something very special about the university sector that keeps us apart from those, maybe even insulates us from some of those geopolitical headwinds. That's a real opportunity. So even though we're all competing for international students, we also can be collaborating in terms of exchanges, in terms of learning abroad, in terms of more faculty to faculty collaboration, bringing our graduate students together and so forth. So I think that's actually something that we could look forward to. The second thing is that I really think that, again, COVID has put us as universities in a position as a partner to government and to society more generally. That the idea of universities as elitist, inaccessible, and so forth are narratives that hopefully are going by the wayside. That we can actually think, when we think about what the university does, our core business, and when it relates specifically to international students, we're attracting talent, we're training talent, we are building in co-curricular experiential learning opportunities for these students, and we're accelerating them into positions of impact in the workforce. What better partner can you ask for, whether you're government or the private sector? And Canada, I know, again, thinking about specifically Canada, one of our greatest advantages has been our work permit program that allows our graduates to work seamlessly after they graduate. And so that's all about talent, right? And the more talent we can bring from around the world, the more of a talented workforce and leadership core we have moving into the future. I think that puts us in a great position to be a real partner to the public sector, the private sector, and the third sector moving forward. And it's all tied again to our international missions. Thanks.
Great. MJ, you're up. Your predictions?
Yeah, I do. I feel like this is weighty. Wow. So, I want to just kind of emphasize again what my colleagues have talked about, but I think the strength of diversity. So I think if you look around at institutions that are surviving and quite frankly thriving, even with all of the challenges we're facing, diversity has been a big part of that. And I think the international population is an important member of that diverse campus. And that includes the faculty who are diverse, coming from all over the world, and our students, and of course our staff. And so I think we will see more, commitment to that idea, because it does cross many different areas that bring strength to an institution, from the financial strength to the, intellectual and quite frankly, our ability to do exactly what Joe was speaking to, which I call the BHAG, right? The bold, hairy, audacious goal that we are going to change the world, and we are an important part of that. And I guess for me, I think we broke through a lot of log jams. we do not believe that, an online course and a virtual course are necessarily, a remote course are necessarily the same. But I think we've shown ourselves that we can do it. Faculty who were resistant to being able to work in a space like this, learning and growth is like this, right? And when you sort of jump into the pool, hopefully it's not over your head, and hopefully we didn't put them over their heads, but you start to figure out how to move in that space. And I think we're there. And so I have a lot of hope that we'll be able to take those elements of innovation that are about technology and are about using information more and asking more in different ways, because we've had to, that those will become a part of what makes us better going forward, more responsive to students, more able to have a diversity in the modes that we teach in, and the way we recruit and the way we do our work. So I think the workforce is going to change. We've been doing a lot of looking at that. I think the world is greener. And all of us talk about this, and I want to hold on to that, right? I love going to Europe because I feel like they're so far ahead in this conversation. But that all of that I think is going to, higher ed has a lot of great people who I think are willing to take the opportunity to make something of this moment.
Great. I love the optimism. Roger, anything to add as far as predictions and kind of looking ahead to the future of higher education?
Well, I completely agree with everything said. Thank you. I wanted to sort of respond in a way that answers your question, Jamie, but gets to Michael's comment in the Q&A. Michael wondered whether this is the realm of prestigious institutions. And the general sense is the big research institutions will muscle through and come out the other side. But for me, it comes back to your values and your mission of your institution. You don't have to be a big, boisterous state university or an amazing private. It's in your values and your mission. Only 42% of Americans, US citizens, Canadian colleagues, own a passport. Only 42%, which, to get to Joseph's points about geopolitics and the rising tide of nationalism, if I abscond with Thomas Friedman's phrase, the age of accelerations, we have no choice but to help our US nationals learn how to be global citizens if we want to be successful. The major challenges of the 21st century are going to involve multinational, interdisciplinary thought. And that's going to be as important on any one of our campuses as anybody else's. So what I'd say to Michael and my colleagues is, have at it. If you bring 50 or 100 international students to your campus and they change the flavor and the conversation and the narrative in your campus life, you will have done all your students a great service. And so that ultimately, Jamie, is why I'm optimistic.
What a great note to wrap up our conversation on. Thank you so much to our panelists for the honest conversation, but also just for the optimism. I think it is really reassuring to hear that actually, despite all of the challenges, despite all of the sort of unforeseen circumstances of the past year, that there's a lot to celebrate and that there's a lot to look forward to, and that there's a lot of success to be found in the ways that universities have really risen to the challenge. So thank you for highlighting those things, and thank you for your time and your expertise today. Thank you to our audience for your thoughtful questions and your engagement and your answers to the polls. And a final big thank you to AECC for sponsoring this event and making it possible for us to have this conversation. We wish you all the best in the coming year, and thanks for joining us today.
AECC Global is proud to work with Times Higher Education to help students around the world realize their dreams to study abroad. Our global team of over 500 dedicated professionals in 34 offices throughout 12 countries are ready to support students almost anywhere in the world.
AECC is opening up a truly global network, and that's really impressive to me. And it's something that I really want to engage with and support.
Aecc Global, not only represented in so many different countries and provides us with a fantastic network, but is always very professional and innovative and a delight to deal with.
And they are incredible to work with and easy and knowledgeable and innovative, you can think of it.
We are proud to have a growing global footprint. We are continuing to open new offices around the world. Our exceptional and amazing team is continuing to grow. We employ more than 500 dedicated professionals around the world. We've come a long way, but we're just getting started.
Aecc Global is rapidly growing market share in the UK, Canada, USA and Australia. Technology is transforming the way students engage with education. And at Aecc Global, we are leading the way with new innovations shaping the future of student recruitment. We are creating world-class self-service platforms for students, making applying to university convenient and faster. Our brand new student portal launching in 2021 will allow students to directly apply to courses via computer or mobile devices. From start to finish, students will be able to choose courses and apply via our platform with our intelligent document requirement generator and compliance team, ensuring applications of quality at the press of a button. Students will be able to manage applications, insurance, and browse a wide range of relevant education content. Our tailor-made, user-friendly course search platform is redefining the way students can search and filter universities and courses online. With rich images and powerful search options, including career outcome searches, accreditation search, and post-study work visa searches, Aecc Global is leading the way. At Aecc Global, we are dedicated to improving the student experience, from making it easier to study abroad to making it more accessible than ever before. As we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, Aecc Global is positioned as one of the top student recruitment organisations in the world, and we look forward to continuing to build new relationships with world-class education providers. When it comes to studying overseas, more students are choosing Aecc Global.